13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to another episode of 13 Questions. I have with me, as always, Adam, and we are joined this episode by Gordon Hamil, who is a regular co-host on Weaving Spiders Welcome and also has a study group called Mystic Inheritance Conspiratorium. And I ran into Gordon on Instagram, but I had seen him on Interverse and again more recently on Uncanny Mystic Minds podcast, who the host we just interviewed recently, Louis, I believe that was a couple episodes back, but they were talking about owls. And I moved recently into the woods, so there are, for the first time in my life, a lot of owls around me. And my neighbor across the street has this giant owl metal statue that he put in this year, so yard decoration. So there's been a lot of owl synchronicities. And I know that Adam and I talked a little bit about Twin Peaks earlier this year on the show, and I didn't ever finish the series, but they mentioned that the owls, there's something that the owls are not what they seem in that series. Is that a spoiler alert? Could I ask you, like, what exactly?
No, it's not a spoiler alert. You need to talk to David Lynch about that.
The owls are not what they seem.
So, the answer is...
An observation. I don't know where this is headed, but the only one of us with the coordinates for this destination in his hardware is you. Go on whatever vision quest you require. Stand on the rim of the volcano. Stand alone and do your dance. Just find this beast before he takes another bite.
Locked in his brain.
So I don't have to finish the series
To find that answer out? No.
Never addressed. Okay.
No. No, I'm a huge fan of owls too. It's actually the thing that pulled me into podcasting. I had a bunch of synchronicities around owls and Mike Clelland's work, listening on the Micah Hanks podcast. And that's what got me in contact with the Grimerica guys. Through that, I found out about the Paradigm Symposium, went there, met them in person, and that's kind of my genesis here. So owls have had a nice little integral synchronistic line in my podcasting career.
Hell yeah. Some synchronicities. I know that Gordy invited us to come hang out with him on his shows, so you'll probably see us over there eventually, and we're going to follow the synchros and see what happens. But back to this show, Adam and I have a little gratitude segment that we do for every show, and the point of this, we have since added a jar to it. We've made it into a working. It's now like a jar spell. So the point of the jingle and of us sharing our gratitudes is to help kickstart the heart-brain coherence, which we talked about many times before on the show, but to tie it into the gratitude jar is since we are value for value, if you do decide to support the show with any amount of money for any length of time, so it could be a one-time donation for like $1, we'll write your name in purple ink and put it in this jar, which is surrounded by certain stones that have metaphysical properties which facilitate in making that heart-brain connection a little bit, I don't know, they're helpers, right? So yeah, if we don't have a stone to add for this episode, but go back and start at episode 98, I believe, is where we first start talking about it, and work your way forward. And so that's just a little bonus I wanted to put out there for any listeners that do want to support. But I did mention the jingle, so we should probably play that so we can talk about our gratitudes.
Gratitude, 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 oh gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh gratitude.
So my gratitude for this episode, I was thinking that I would add on to my coffee cacao drink that I talked about in an intro not too long ago. I'm now calling it. My wife came up with this term cacao fee for the combination of our instant coffee and ceremonial grade, really good cacao, which is sourced from our friend Jonas Ketterle over at oracacao.com, who we are affiliated with. So if you want to support the show and buy some chocolate, definitely use the link and use Jonas's stuff because it's 100% ceremonial grade, which means there's no sugar in it, which brings me to my gratitude, is adding honey to my coffee drink in the morning, my cacao drink, which we did talk about this with Jonas, and he said that as long as the purity of the cacao is above 80%, you can consider it ceremonial grade. So adding a little bit of like natural honey or organic honey or maple syrup is okay if you don't like the bitterness of the cacao so much. And I've grown accustomed to the bitterness. I kind of like it, but I have been adding this honey specifically because it's Shungite infused honey from our friend Derek Condit over at Mystical Wares, whom we are also affiliated with. And you may find links to his website plus a 10% off code for to help support this show on you can find the links on the website or on the show notes. But he's making this he's a beekeeper too, so he makes this Shungite infused honey, and he's been putting silver in it recently too. So I've been putting Shungite and silver, cacao and honey and all this good stuff in my morning drink, and it's been working out pretty well. And especially as the season gets cooler up here, having a nice tall cup of cacao and coffee and all the good stuff mixed in there warms the bones. So yeah, if any of that sounds interesting to you and you want to make your own drink, check out our affiliates and you'll get the ingredients that you need to do that.
So my gratitude is just more of a continuation of working from home. I've been continuing to clean up, getting the studio ready here. Moving one thing over here turned into moving another thing, turned into rewiring everything, which then turned into looking around and going, while I'm cleaning up, I found this microphone over here. I've got this radio hooked up over there. I've got that record player over there that I've been meaning to hook up. So I just kind of went gangbusters, and as I cleaned, I got every single thing hooked up. So currently I have 5 microphones. I got my keyboard MIDI hooked back into my computer. I got a synthesizer now hooked up to the board, hooked the guitar pedals back up so I can do FX effects, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. It's just things that I've accumulated, and I've let this place get pretty cluttered, but I'm going to be spending a lot of time in an optimized space, and I let it get to the point where I had things that I couldn't utilize, and it's very nice to declutter, to organize, and to find that I've got all of these tools. So it's getting my creative juices flowing in thinking of all the things I could do. It's exciting. So yeah, I've prepared a pretty damn cool studio, and I'm really, really, really looking forward to the other stuff I'm going to be doing, because I've really laxed on just all the other things I used to do, whether it be just with podcasting and music, and it's beyond 13 questions. Just I had all these things that I would do in the background, personally recording audio, the amount of stuff that I would watch just to record audio clips and video game clips, and just all these things that I've accumulated, and I had a lot of fun doing. And so, yeah, now that I'm getting optimized for that in this space, I'm just getting re-excited as I've got it set back up. So, my gratitude is just the technology and how it can breed creativity. And, when you clean up your life and you realize that once you organize things, you can really utilize some of the stuff that's just become clutter and held you back. So
Yeah, that really speaks to how like optimizing, like you said, leaning, trying to be more efficient, having a routine opens up space for being creative. And I'm super excited to see what you come up with now that you're making this big switch over from the commute to a no commute lifestyle. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting transition. I've done it temporarily before, but this is on a just a completely different level, so it'll be fun. Not really different than what I'm doing though. Just the same, but at home.
Lots of exciting, different changes, small changes, but large impacts will be had in the future with the show and just creativity in general. I think with I don't know, just adding more flair to things. We'll see what we come up with, right? But yeah, exciting things to look forward to. I think that it's pretty safe to say that you can look out for us on Gordy's show at some time. And yeah, this chat was really good. I feel like I made a friend. I think the show made a friend, and yeah, you guys will enjoy it. So if you like this and you want to hear more conversations such as this, head on over to the website, which is 13questionspodcast.com. That is 13questionspodcast.com. There you'll be able to find a list of the questions that we use, some of the questions anyway. You'll be able to find a book list, which is all the guest answers from question 3, which is the book question. And you'll find other episodes and some contact information if you want to get a hold of us. So yeah, everybody check out the website, which is 13questionspodcast.com. Any last thoughts, Adam, before we jump into the interview?
Support the things you love. If you don't, the garden is going to die. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. It was a really fun one. So I had some nice synchronicities, like I mentioned before, but the whole podcast, I really like the way this guy thinks.
And this is 13 Questions with Gordon Hamil.
When two separate events occur simultaneously pertaining to the same object of inquiry, you must always pay strict attention.
Question number 1. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
Yeah, man, you guys, this feels like one of the, maybe not the hardest one, but one of the hardest. Everybody's definition is going to be different, and we see it through this lens because of our examples, of our fathers or our grandfathers or whoever raised us. And I was thinking about that the kind of archetype kind of things with certain father figures in our lives. Like my grandfather was a Navy war hero from World War II. My dad was an academic, and my stepdad was like a professional athlete. But each one of them had very different roles in my life. Like there was very different, like my stepdad, the athlete, he was the one that showed me how to hunt and fish. My dad was the thinker. He was the one that gave me a love for knowledge and, examining our world. And all of them had this love for the natural world, which I think I kind of repressed in my younger days, but had a longing later on in life, especially now, like after I went to rehab 4 years ago, like about when you guys started this. And in fact, my sober date is coming up on 11/11. Cool date, right? So I really found that nature is like, one of the threads that all three of them had was this love of the natural world, and how I think is in our technologically centered world, like everything revolves around, this kind of thing, which is great because we can do this. Like, this is a miracle. I'm talking, you're in Michigan and Florida. I'm in Arizona. Like, this is amazing. We can cross international borders with this thing. But there's something that I think men, as a man, I was missing. I shouldn't say all men, but as a man, I was missing that back to nature call. And after I got out, I established this relationship with the owls, and it really made me, reevaluate my relationship with nature. And for me, as I don't even know how to answer that. A man, what the definition of a man is. It's just what I am. And we have these conversations, which is very cool, about, the divine masculine, divine feminine. And we try to, figure out and tear down our roles, or what our role is, right? And I've always thought that, not always, I've come to think that, our roles, like the archetypes, we all, if we live long enough, we're going to hopefully we embody all of them, right? But if we're being authentic to ourselves, and like I was telling you guys before we started, am I answering these things honestly and authentically? We need to ask that of ourselves. So hopefully we embody every aspect of a man's life, but by the time we're done, which could be everything. You could be the cook, the seamstress, you could be a seamstress, a tailor, or whatever, and still be, the man. If you're excelling at whatever your field is, I mean, that's, I guess, what a man is. I don't know what it is. Every man has got to define that for themselves, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's part of what the show is trying to do, is to find the common threads and pull on them. And definitely diving into the archetypes is one of them. And I love that you said that we all eventually embody all the archetypes, because that made me think of, astrology, right? Because a lot of people will say, like, oh, I'm a this or a that, and that'll just be like their sun sign or their rising sign or something. Well, if you really look at the whole system, all the planets are still there when you're born. You're still, they're still having an effect on you. So you can't just identify with one archetype of one planet or one house or one constellation or whatever. You're all of them, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and your chart isn't just one thing, and it's not just when you were born either. It's all the things. We are made up of that star stuff too. It's epigenetic for us. All these different roles. I don't know if you guys have ever gone into past life stuff or not, but if you do, you find out, there are things in you that you never thought could have possibly been there. And maybe we're not exactly experiencing somebody else's or our life, where maybe it's somebody else's, because you can't really prove it, but it's that experiential nature that when you feel it in your soul, those kind of things, those truths in your soul, You're like, oh, wow. Kind of makes you examine yourself differently. Just like these, the point of all these questions is for self-examination, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so. Introspection and encourage that in everybody. I mean, it's what it did to me. It took me, I mean, at least 2 weeks to come up with answers for these questions when I went through them, which is episode 38. If anybody wants to listen to that, I should probably. I don't know if it would be appropriate to re-interview myself at this point, but that's beside the conversation.
You should do that at some point, though. It'd be interesting to see how you've changed in that time.
Yeah, for sure. I also love, before we move on to the second question, that you opened up with love as kind of your first thought in your answer, love for the natural world. I think that's applicable to how, no matter how you dissect the question, as a man, gender, or as man, as in like the species of, we are all man, right?
Right.
And yeah, love it for the natural world. Like, we're here to be stewards,
Right.
we're not
In
going
the old sense of man, as man is human,
Mhm.
as man in the Bible is just human.
Yeah.
Same thing with, the Franz Barden, the Hermetics book. They talk about man, but he's talking about human. These are written turn of the century maximum. So, we need to have that more holistic view that we are not just a modern definition of a man or male. We are embodying all sorts of things.
All right. Question number 2. What was the most important lesson you learned from your parents?
Oh, right. I have to look at this one. This was interesting because, I think for a lot of us, for our generation, well, I'm 50, so growing up in the 70s and the 80s, it was the time of latchkey kids. And there weren't a lot of parental guidance around. I mean, it was wonderful to be able to, ride your bikes until dark, and that's when you had to get home. But there was also a very generational, hands-off approach to parenting, which was also a blessing and a curse, But in looking back at our parents' struggles, if we can, I don't want to dig on my parents because they did, they had a go of it, but I feel that about myself too as a parent, that hopefully my daughter can see me as a good example. But if I can't be a good example, be a terrible warning, right? They say that, hopefully that we've taught our daughter, better than we were taught. But, taking all those bumps and the chaos of a childhood that was moving all over the place, it was a constant moving target. You learn a lot of ways to adapt, I think, because they were always changing. I think that's one of the things that I think I've really learned from my parents is that change is inevitable, and it doesn't probably need to be not necessarily comfortable with it, but an acceptance of it is a healthy thing, and to kind of roll with the punches,
Yeah, I love that. Ways to adapt, like rolling with the punches, because for better or for worse, I mean, our parents are how we first learn to get energy from this world when we're small, and what the mechanism in which we learn to do that absolutely affects us as we grow up and become older. And we're looking back at that, is exactly why we put this question in. This is why we have 14 questions this episode instead of 13, because the parent and ancestor motif that was kind of one of the pillars of the show kind of got lost in the shuffle, I felt like. So we reintroduced this question and put it in the number 2 slot. But being able to look back, right, and have that introspection and realize from a hopefully more mature perspective, like no matter what the experience was, hopefully it was a good one, right? But if I know that's not always the case, but if they were bad, then being able to send some love and healing back towards that person. So, and because that person is you, like your childhood. It's part of childhood work, right? Dealing with the inner child, you gotta go back to that little guy and make sure he's okay first, before you can move on. At least I found that's helpful anyway.
No, it's definitely helpful to be able to go back and have empathy for that young person in kind of almost a third person position is, I think, very freeing. And it gives you a perspective on, wow, man, I was only like realizing that, you could tell your story like, oh, I had this big head injury when I was 6 or whatever. But I was like, holy shit, I was only 6. like that person went through some shit, and to have compassion for that kid instead of going, buck up, you little pussy, and that kind of where it's in the back of your head, don't be such a weakling. Instead go, wow, man, you made it through that. Wow. And have compassion for that kid. That's you. That person is still there somewhere.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like a kind of a badass, because if you went through something traumatic, right, and you survived it, like a head injury or anything physical, really. I was talking to my wife the other day. We were swapping stories about our scars, and I have this one on my arm where I fell out of a tree when I was younger, right? And just earlier this summer, I threw a rib out pushing a mower up the back hill. Like, our bodies become so less resilient when we get older. So looking back and when we're younger and be able to bounce back, physically from traumas is something to be thankful for. But yeah, that's on the physical level. Emotional level is another thing, but it can be a good starting off point, jumping point if you need a, I don't know, a writing prompt.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And those are a little harder, the emotional ones.
Yeah, but I appreciate that you were able to see that in this question and being able to look back, because reauthorizing our past and reauthorizing those stories that we tell ourselves is super important to how we identify today. And it's something that I learned from Mark England and a bunch of the referrals that he sent the show. I think we've interviewed about 6 people that he sent our way. We've got 4 more out there in the universe to get to, but we'll get those eventually, I promise.
Very cool.
All right. On to question number 3. What book has been most influential in your life and why?
It's hard to pick one, but and I doubt you have this one yet, but it should be on a list of books that change people's life, is Victor Wooten's The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten. And Victor Wooten is the bass player for the big group is Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, but he's also been voted best in the world for more times than you can count. But he's also the coolest teacher I think I've ever seen. He has a camp out in Nashville, a nature camp, where he takes kids and especially like He takes advanced students, but he'll take anybody and take them out with nothing. And you can make music. You can start this with anybody. And I used a lot of his teaching techniques from this book when I taught voice and performance at a School of Rock program. And but what it is, it's essentially it's kind of a Buddha story where he goes through with all these different teachers who just kind of magically show up in his life and tell him this lesson or that lesson, or that music is a language that we use to emote. Or that the biggest lesson that I took from this was to be in flow, to try and be in constant flow. He's a jazz musician. So one of the things with jazz is in any improvisational music is, sure, those guys are educated in theory and all those other things, but it doesn't matter. None of the theory or anything matters, because the person who hears it is only going to be concerned with the sound or how it makes them feel, right? Ultimately, it's how the listener interacts with it. Now, when you put that out, whatever that is, out into the world, it's going to have that intent with it, which will take me to an answer for one of our other questions. But when you're emoting music, or anytime we put ourselves out there, we're putting a piece of ourselves. The intent makes a difference. When you're cooking something, the intent that you're putting into that food is making a difference in how that thing is going to react in your body. It's going to make a difference in how people hear the music, because there are subtleties that our brains pick up that other people pick up subconsciously. And I feel like he really has a handle on that authenticity of sound, of what you're putting out your intent. And that made a huge difference in how I try to treat most endeavors now. So The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten.
Yeah, that is not one that we have had on our list yet. So that's another one that I will have to explore. I love that, intention absolutely does make a difference in music. And I mean, just there's different genres. If that wasn't a absolute thing, then we wouldn't have different genres, to say the least. But intent makes a difference in water, right? I mean, water has memory. Water holds all of that, right? And I love that you brought up the food analogy too. My wife was a chef when I met her, and I love to cook too. So mixing while you're making the food, having that loving feeling and putting that into what you're doing and sending that out, it's absolutely going to have an effect on other people and how they receive it. 100%.
Any creative endeavor. In fact, one of the things I started doing was singing to my food when I'm cooking. There's the whole Yamamoto or Dr. Yamamoto,
I think.
Yamamoto, the Japanese study where he
Yeah.
did the crystal work. It's demonstrable, and every single time you put that intent out there, it's going to change the molecular structure. So when you're doing an intent with every meal that you make, I was very unhealthy 4 years ago. And part of that, coming out of that, was making cooking for myself be a meditative endeavor. Like I was going to do intention everything, like live in the now kind of thing, and everything that you're doing, let it be a meditative state as much as you can. And it made a huge difference in how I cook, because I stopped eating sugar, wheat, and soy, but I went on keto first to try and rebuild my brain because I was having neurological issues, and making that be a concerted intent with my food. And this applies with any creative endeavor, of the art you make, of the music you make, of the food we cook, of what you write. It makes all the difference in the world. It's why stuff from grandmas singing in the kitchen, they always taste better than everybody else's, right? You could do the same recipe, but it just doesn't have that thing, right? And that thing is, they say it's love. It's almost a joke, but it is. It's love.
Exactly. It's that special touch that everybody has, that only that person can give that project, right? Or whatever creation they're bringing into existence. It's special, right? It's
exactly
magic presence.
Yeah, I've heard one of our previous guests, Dean Radin, talking about that. Like, hey, if you really want to just impact and improve the nutritional food system, they're showing, or they've showed in studies, that if you bless the nutrients going to a plant, that you get better bioabsorption. So it's like, okay, well, simply, if we just start blessing our food right now, we can start doing a scientific way of just increasing the health of the nation. And I mean, that is just a simple building block, because in the as above, so below, if you can do that, then so many more doors to open.
Wouldn't that be a thing? Like, could we imagine getting the whole country on one thing like that? Even if you're just doing McDonald's, if you bless it first, I mean, it's still going to be garbage, but it's going to be better garbage. I don't know.
Well, I would think if there's anything good in there, you would be just more apt to absorb the good and less the bad. And really, I mean, in this world, uranium is natural. There's toxins in the environment we're constantly filtering, just happen to be exposed to more than ever. So, if there's somehow this ability of perception and, intent on both ends that can change that balance, I don't know. It might actually make a bigger difference than we think. Wildlife grows back at Chernobyl.
Dude, wildlife is growing back here. It's going crazy here. I don't know about you guys, but we've had rain over the last. We usually get monsoons for maybe a month starting in July, like around July 4th, but it hasn't stopped. And a lot of people around here, maybe not a lot, but there are some concerted group. I don't know if you know who Mitch, the organ donor, is, but he's gotten a lot of people putting out the intentions with orgone devices around southern Arizona, and it has been a godsend. Like, the whole area is changing. Like, we have standing waters in the Cienegas again. Cienegas were kind of a swampland, a marshland, but it's been dry for generations. The Santa Cruz River has not run in my lifetime, other than monsoon flooding. It's kind of a regular thing now. And I asked my mother the other day about it, and she said she's never seen it like that in her lifetime. So she would have had moved here in the 60s, I guess. So yeah, the intention, I think we can change the weather. We can change a lot of things.
You said that was relatively recently with the rainfall. Because Lake Mead has been dropping in level recently, but I know that it's been going back up like very recently. Is that in conjunction, like in the last, I don't know, month or so with the rainfall? And
see, I keep hearing people say that about Lake Mead and Lake Powell, but see, I don't see how we could take those as good gauges because both of them are dammed. So the flow is controllable in both of those bodies of water. Whereas I know there's been droughts in a lot of those lakes, but it's hard to tell. But I do think that the groundwater has been coming back. I don't know that that's just rainfall. So it makes me question even if the water cycle that we think we know is wrong. Like, I'm questioning that kind of stuff even because of these things, which I think it's healthy to question what we think we know, question what we're taught, because otherwise we keep making the same mistakes over and over again. It's the definition of insanity. If we keep playing by the same rules, voting, it's never going to change anything. If you don't do that thing, you change it, you stop playing the game, I think it might change a lot of things. Or at least seeing it differently, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you keep taking the same avenue, you're always going to end up at the same destination. And sometimes you got to take a turn into an area that you never thought, drill a hole where you thought there was nothing. Yeah, you might only get lucky every so often, but I mean, those are the big changes in culture, society, or at least the things that we define as definitive, signposts in society. They are all from unexpected deviations of the norm.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Deviations to the norm. I think that's a healthy place to be.
What was the best advice ever given to you, and would you modify it at all today?
Oh, right. Okay, so this goes into the saying. This is going to be the answer to the previous thing. So when I was a kid, I was doing voice lessons, and my mom had me doing them with Sister Peg Johnson at this Catholic school that my stepdad was a coach at. And so I would do these weekly voice lessons with Sister Peg. And one time she's like, I was doing it and I'm going through the motions, I'm singing all the right notes and it sounds good to me. And she's like, quit, forget it. Go home. You don't care. Go home. I'm like, what? I'm doing it right. Every note is right. It's perfect. She's like, no, it's not. You don't care. And I hear it. You can't convince me that you care about this person. Like it was a love song. And she's like, you're singing of this beautiful woman with the golden hair that you're in love with, and you couldn't care less. So I don't really want to care about listening to somebody who doesn't care about what they're singing about, because I can tell. Everybody can tell. When you're putting that out there, the listener knows. She sent me home. She literally she went through with it and sent me home. I was like devastated, right? And I think I was still in elementary then. Maybe into junior high, but it made a huge difference in whatever you're doing. Mean what you say, which also made me choose song choices a lot more critically later on in life too. If it's not something that I feel like I can be authentic about or speak about, from a true authentic place, then maybe not talk about or maybe not sing that thing. Choose something else that you can speak from your own experience instead of regurgitating something somebody else told you. It even goes to that kind of thing. I think it's a lesson for the whole, and it's the same thing that was in that book. Mean it. Mean what you're doing.
Well, that's what's beautiful about music. It's more than the words. You're conveying the true emotion, and everybody has a bullshit detector that is really good. And when it comes to things that just connect, those songs that, I mean, they just make you cry. They hit you in a spot where you just, your physiology changes.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get that unless you pour in that true honesty.
Right.
And it's strange because, I mean, your voice wears your pain through the stages of your life, through grief. Listen to people as you're sick. I mean, you wear your emotions in the way that you sound. It is one of those amazing things that I don't think we pay attention to enough. We think about songbirds, around us, and they're singing, and people whistle and sing, and we listen to music all day. But I don't think people, think of us vocalizing in, these ways where there's more than just words communicated.
Yeah, and it's even when you're playing an instrument too, because like Hendrix always said, it was never the guitar. It's in the fingers. It's all here. The same. If you've ever listened to Jeff Beck, how Jeff Beck plays, nobody sounds like Jeff Beck. You'd be really hard pressed to hear anybody that has a style. A lot of people try and imitate it, but they can't do it because it's just him and his physiology, whatever. But he is able to emote through his fingertips, through those strings, like that will make you cry.
That's magic. I move my fingers and I create a vibration that changes what you're feeling. I control. We share a moment. That's as magical as you can get in this world.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing that I keep finding in all these hermetic and magic books is magic is in the hands. It's all right here. That's how Reiki works.
Yeah, and it's in the doing of it too, like the implementation. It has to be practical, right? We can sit and talk about music theory all day, but unless you listen to a piece of music that moves you, at least, if not play it, be able to play an instrument, which I can't, right? But everybody can listen and be moved that way and dance, right? If you can't play an instrument or
even if you can't play, though, what sounds good or bad to you, what connects to you, because you are having the emotional. You are part of the music. As a listener, you are part of the music. You are part of that composition, because whether you're connecting to it or not, you're having a reaction. That's what every musician is going for.
You're closing the loop. You're making the circuit. Without it, the energy doesn't exist. You're singing into an empty hall, and it's just echoes.
Or the book that may not be. You're the other circuit. You're the other author. Because you're hearing that voice that you're reading in your head as somebody else, as someone, and it may not be that exact author. It may be your version of that author, but it's still how it connects with you that matters. And that's one of the beautiful things about art that I appreciate about those artists that won't define their art or are resistant to defining their art. Like, I've played with guys that only play metal or only play punk or only, or only do realism, only paint realism or only do comic books. But then there's that surrealist who goes, it's whatever you want it to be. And that's like, what, Salvador Dali? The world defines them. We come up with words for these genres and things like, okay, going back to Victor Wooten, they invented their own genre. Bella Fleck was a banjo player, He came from Newgrass Revival. Victor Wooten, he was the bass player. He came from a funk family band. The drummer was his brother, who created his own instrument, the drumitar thing that was all buttons. It was the first real touchpad drum machine. He made it so that he could walk around and just play, and he had all sorts of things all over it, crazy looking contraption. And then they had a jazz pianist, Howard Levy, who was just a phenomenal, but we had to call it jazz, but it really wasn't. It was its own thing. Like, it was improvisational music, but it wasn't any of those things. It was something else. It was something special. And I think when you don't have those limits of it is this or it is that, you're free to be open to whatever happens. And sometimes it's magic, sometimes it's a train wreck. I've been in those bands too, where 50% it was like, man, that was cool. And the other 50%, let's never do that again.
Question number 5. What do you willfully ignore?
Willfully, let's see what I wrote. Hopefully I ignore the unhealthy things like politics and media and whatever's popular. I'm not cool. I'm not good at whatever's popular usually. I don't know if it's a willful rebellion against the mainstream or just something that is usually pretty cringy to my being, but hopefully it's like food. We choose those things that are healthy for us. I ignore the fast food place and keep walking to something that I can get that's better, or I'm just going to go home and make it myself. Make our own art. Willfully ignore the unhealthy things in our lives. I guess it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, don't give your power away to something that's not going to help you out in the end.
Right. That makes me think about the idea of you are not your thoughts, or you're not necessarily what you're thinking at any necessarily given moment. It could be something somebody's told you or something you believe because of some failed school system or things that a lot of us are finding out now that, the world isn't the way it was supposed to be defined for us. And those boundaries are getting thinner and thinner, like all the time. Like, we think the world is this way. It works X, Y, Z. And when you do this, that happens. But that's not the case. We're finding out that we can manipulate. Hey, if we know that the government can manipulate the weather, you know what? Maybe we can too. And maybe we should. Maybe we should be pushing back that.
Yeah, it's the power of the mind. We just can't let them power our minds. If we, it's amazing to me when people think about or, nonchalantly mention like, simulation theory and this and that. And I'm like, well, if you're entertaining that, think of how much power you have.
Right.
Like, entertain it, test it, see what happens. If we all do that, yeah, I mean, a government is there because we agree it should be there, and the things it does are agreed upon. If we all decided it didn't, well, nobody's working for them. There's no one in the military. Like, the control just dissolves.
Yeah. What if nobody voted? That would finally get somebody's attention.
It would just make up the votes then. It would just,
That's true. They would just make them up. That is very true.
that is one question that's always kind of perplexed me, is the voting thing. Like, I won't get into it now, but like, if it matters so much, they wouldn't allow us to do it. But then why is there so much fraud? That's
Right.
like, I don't know.
Adam, you got me thinking about a question I like to ask a lot of people when we're getting to know them is, how woo do you do? How woo do you get? Like, how weird is your weird? Like, what's your definition of weird? And this is a rhetorical question that I try to get other people to ask of themselves. Like, how weird is too weird? Like, can I manipulate the weather? I've got this picture right here is from one of my good friends in our group, because we were on a call one time, and I was doing these meditations with these stones that I find out in the desert, right? And there's a different each set of these stones has a different vibration to them. And as I was doing them, they watched it live. I was doing a meditation with them, and lightning struck just as I did a kind of a thing with them. And that's what our friend Andy drew for me, is lightning striking behind my head as I was doing that. But it was just for them, like, maybe you can say it's just coincidence, but I mean, I've had too many amazing things to say that everything is just coincidence. Like, I just coincidentally stumbled onto a family of owls that accepted me as one of their own. That doesn't just happen. A, it takes hard work, and B, there's something else. There's something else that we're not understanding, that we should probably, be open to the woo, to the magic that is obviously happening all around us that we're not paying attention to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that was way off the question, but
right on
awesome.
topic in my brain.
Right on, good.
Yeah, it's almost easier to, when you're dealing with like the strangeness or synchronicities or whatever, it's almost easier to approach it from a viewpoint of coincidence just doesn't exist. Like, everything means something, so just try to deal with it that way, and then things might turn out differently, or you might find something new or whatever, right? At least that's what I've found, is just to accept that fact. Like, coincidences don't exist, right? That's
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
There is something beyond ourselves and I honestly think it's this collective net that you and I are participating in, like Jung would have called it the collective unconscious, but others would call it God or source. If we're being open to that source that we're all connected to, whether we like it or not, amazing things can happen. Like, maybe we have telepathy. Maybe we can do that across the country. Actually, it works a lot better across the country than it does maybe somebody in the next room, because you're not overthinking it. But there's this collective net that connects all of us, that we're much more powerful than we think we are.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit about books before we recorded, and one of the ones I'm reading right now is The Field by Lynn McTaggart, and she begins the book by talking about Ed Mitchell, one of the astronauts that went to the moon. And on his way back, or I guess during the whole trip, he was doing telepathy experiments with people here on Earth. He was trying to send them images and write messages to certain groups of people, apparently, and there were varying success rates and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, these things are not woo woo so much, because there's not to say that that because the government is exploring them to give them any more that gives them any more credence, right? But like there's absolutely other people looking at these subjects, and if that wasn't, if they didn't have some practical application, then that wouldn't be the case, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, question number 6. What rule do you have for yourself that you never break? Why do you think that it's important?
The I don't know if there's that I never break. I don't break the eating of wheat, and that's not by a choice necessarily, because it wrecks my system every time now. If I eat processed food, any kind of processed food, once I got healthy, there's no going back. Your mental facilities return. It fixes all sorts of things. You have a different perspective on life. You can see things from other people's point of view, or once you get your body healthy, it changes a lot of other things. So if there's one thing I'm sticking to, it's that. It's going to be that I won't eat junk food anymore.
Hell yeah, dude! The mental clarity that comes with taking care of your body is something that is just, you don't really know how to explain it to other people unless you've experienced it yourself. Because I went through the same thing kind of with the wheat thing. I had an unhealthy gut, right? I had too much candida, so part of fixing that, I had to deal with wheat, right? Cutting back on sugar, and it wasn't fun. I had a lot of skin problems, and yeah, it was a whole ordeal. But the other side of it, like, yeah, totally worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. The skin things were a big thing with me too. But yeah, wheat, sugar, and soy, I won't touch them anymore. And it's not. I say that like it's no big deal, but
It's in everything.
once you've kind of given up everything, like it's actually easy to not do. It's easier to not go back than to go back and live like that.
Yeah, because then it becomes painful. Like you notice, it's like, oh, you could try to do that, because I did. Like I mean, I didn't try very hard because it was painful, right? It's like you don't want to do that. You don't want to put yourself through that again. It's just not worth it, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, it's like opiates and alcohol were kind of my thing, and I'm not going to do that again. Learn my lesson there, Did I answer the question? What?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Yeah, it was. What rule do you have for yourself that you?
Oh yeah.
And I think Adam is going to pick up with 7 through 14 now, unless you had something to add. But
Yeah, no, I think this is actually the hardest one, I think. Now that I'm thinking about it. These are not easy questions, gentlemen.
Do you need another minute?
No, go ahead. Let's keep rolling. I'm good, man.
If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
I think for a lot of people that sometimes I can come off as like, it sounds like maybe arrogance or even narcissism, maybe, when you know you're right about something and you just can't understand why other people don't see it the same way. And that comes off as arrogance, and it is. It is an arrogance. But when you know things because of your own experience, And it comes off as, I think a lot of people have kind of gone through this last few years where a lot of people are demonized for their beliefs or just trying to get by or compromising. A lot of people have compromised their own physical health, their own bodies, really, in the last few years by choice. And it has separated how a lot of society sees each other. And this is all engineered. It's all made to divide each other. And for one group, it comes off as arrogance. And for the other group, that comes off as arrogance. Trying to see the world from as many views as possible. I'm skipping ahead and answering another question. But, my father-in-law had taken me aside and I was really, when I was younger, I grew up in the church, and I was a card-carrying Republican, and I would listen to Rush Limbaugh every day, and really sucked in because it was like Clinton years, and it was, shit was ugly. And he kind of helped me understand that I was putting so much importance on this thing that really didn't matter because I was the only one who had to be right, because I saw it this way, and there's no way it could be any other way. And he made me see that, I still felt the same way I was, but after everything has been stripped away of your whole being and you have to actually reevaluate your life from scratch, like none of that shit matters. None of that shit matters. And I think seeing it, being objective, I think has been a huge lesson. And I think that's probably something that I could always improve on.
Yeah, the I don't know how to address that topic of the health, the thing that you brought up, but it is absolutely something that has caused a lot of division, and it is super hard to be objective when we feel a certain way about the ramifications or consequences of certain things, and especially when they affect others that we love, right? But being objective can be hard, and yeah, respecting other people's free will is just what it comes down to, and
yeah, exactly.
It can be difficult, and yeah. Life is hard sometimes.
But I mean, ultimately, that's really what we want. We want diversity among ideas and thoughts and what people can do, because if you're all eating only one type of food or engaging in a certain type of behavior, and then, that one thing disappears or the one weakness comes in, everybody is, protected against, XYZ because we have this, and that this is no longer available, like adrenaline as an example or something, well, then you're going to have these, cascading effects. And it's just beautiful to just accept the fact that this diversity, whether you agree with it or not, you're never or always going to be right on any or everything. And it allows our thoughts to grow and fight each other, and come out with the better ideas winning on top. But, ultimately, we're here because people have, like we said before, taken those unique positions, decisions. And so I always kind of couch that in my brain that, through history, people have always thought they've been right or on the right side of, morals or any topic, and they always seem to be wrong. So I just assume that I am, and therefore I cannot judge others.
Yeah, we try to, right?
It's hard.
It's hard.
For sure.
Especially when it affects the health of somebody we love too. That's where, when the rubber meets the road, and people like Adam, you brought up the simulation theory thing. How can you be so set on something if you don't even know what reality is? We can't even define what real is other than, perception. And perception is the only thing that is actually happening. Oh, here's another book that may or may not be on your list that changed a lot of the ways I thought. Biocentrism by Robert Lanza. He posits that nothing actually exists until we preserve it or observe it. That, they've kind of proven over and over again that the observer effect affects reality. From the double slit experiment to planting orgone pipes in the desert, intention is everything, going back to intention, because what is real is how we perceive it. It's not really a piece of music. It could be a bunch of sounds, but when we perceive it, like those rocks banging together in that specific rhythm, like we've heard machinery and we go, oh yeah, like you can groove to a piece of industrial machinery because there's a rhythm to it. But it's just a piece of machinery and a bunch of noise. But to somebody else's perspective, maybe they're standing in a different part of the building and it sounds beautiful to them. Or it has a resonance that the other person doesn't hear. Or maybe it's just your ear that is hearing it different, because there's something in your ear, there's extra cilia in your ear that is picking up on a different harmonic that somebody else is not catching. So it's not connecting with that person, but it is with you. So yeah, biocentrism by Robert Lanza. It's a very scientific study of the observer effect, but that made a huge difference in how I perceive objectivity.
It absolutely makes sense, though. I mean, we are living in many ways, it is the world around you, just, your perception of that exactly that defines the world you live in. I mean, if you just take yourself down, just simple thought experiments of, remove all of the mind cages, you're a human being living on this planet, you could just walk outside and go and live. But yet we're living under the laws of where if somebody sees you urinating in public, you can get arrested and go to jail. You get caught hunting the wrong things, you're in the wrong place. Like now all of a sudden we're dealing with this whole other different world that we completely buy into, the stress of life, all the bill paying. And, if there's, a giant Carrington event and we lose all electricity, bills don't mean anything. The entire, our worldview, what the world is, our place in it completely changes. And yeah, I'm always amazed that, it's the classic rat race. People just get caught up in what's around them. And ultimately, it's just the photons, it's the vibrations of the people, it's how they're moving, it's our perception of those things. And then it's how we influence those other things that influence this thing that we are in. And it truly is beautiful where we're at. I mean, as bad and as terrible as things are, we don't have to worry about the wolves. We don't have to worry about the bears. We have clean water. Yeah, it's toxic, but things are still better than they were in so many of these simple ways, even if it's just for comfort. So yeah, I don't know. It's this, I think at this point, if we can put the brakes on a lot of things and shift our perspective, like this thing could become something beautiful with its foundation.
Amen. That's very true.
What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
I've already mentioned it. It was having to go to rehab. Before that, actually, I'll back up. Before that was asking for help because I had become suicidal at one point. I was addicted to, I had a physical dependence. It wasn't necessarily an addiction. I don't have that addiction gene necessarily, but I have the addiction that everybody can have to whatever substance, sugar or alcohol or whatever. But I had a broken neck years earlier and had migraines and all sorts of chronic pain. And so I got hooked on opiates, and which started this terrible spiral. I was on all sorts of other medications for this, that, and the other. And I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So I'm like, fuck this. I ended up, starting to drink myself to death, and got to a point where it was willful. I was trying to find an exit strategy, and I had to ask for help. I had to humble myself and say, I'm not going to make it if I don't do something real soon. And so I went to the hospital and emergency and said, hey, I need a psych evaluation. But I was in full on panic mode. I was having anxiety, not even anxiety attacks. It was full on panic attacks. My eyes were dilated and freaking out. And humbling myself to do that wasn't the worst. It was, so I had to go into a mental health facility as a stabilization for a week. And then after that, I knew I had to get clean off of everything else, or I also wasn't going to, if I just got out and went down the same road, I'd still be in the same boat. So I knew I had to get off everything. So I had to go to rehab. And that actually wasn't the worst part. It was coming back and having to rejoin society and the people that know you, and know that you disappeared for 30 days and it was probably rehab. That's a humbling experience, but it forces you to redefine yourself in a very big way. And if you don't, what you did isn't going to stick anyway. So that experience had to happen for me to grow. I think it was a necessary. It was the fire that burnt out the carbon. That was it. I mean, it's a definitive point in my life. 4 years ago, next month. In fact, you know what? It is the end of October. This was the week I went into the mental health facility. In fact, because I spent Halloween in there with a bunch of nut jobs, and I remember sitting in one of the community rooms with this guy. There was one guy who said he was Satan, and then there was another guy who said he was the devil. So they were a fun bunch of groups. But it was my, exposure to real mental illness, like real schizophrenia and real paranoia. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm doing pretty good. Like, I thought I was in bad shape, but it was like, wow, okay, I may be mentally sick right now, but this is true mental illness. And seeing that is also a healthy dose of perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna say perspective, and then dude, happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's always wonderful just to hear people being able to pull out of that and be able to look back. I mean, I can't imagine being at such a low level and, just realizing, wow, like I can go so much further. I really got to turn this around. That's I don't know, man. That's cool. Congratulations. I'm glad that's 4 years.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Because I can, I've heard people mention on your podcast before too, gratitude.
Oh yeah.
That's a huge thing. If you don't come back from something like that without a whole shit ton of gratitude, it's probably not going to, whatever you did is probably null and void, because you're missing the point. And I will constantly come back to nature, because essentially that's what healed me. That's what I feel truly healed me, was getting close to nature. But doing a gratitude practice in nature, an actual, I go out and thank my owls, I thank my tree, I thank the earth, I stick my hands in the dirt and have a genuine gratitude for where I am now as to where I was. And because of the natural world, my connection to it got me healthy. And it's not because nature needs your gratitude. Nature is going to do what it does anyway, but it changes you. And I remember a pastor saying that growing up in church, that God doesn't need our prayers. We need the prayer to have that intercession with the divine. And that made a lot of sense. We have this relationship with, and we think we just have it with an abstract God, but there is God everywhere. God is also in the face of your wife when she saves your ass because you're losing your mind. God is in the face of your child when she tells you she loves you.
Yeah, you're part of a system. It's a balance, it's a harmony, it's a place, it's something that you are here because we are. And yeah, when you think about it, when you look at the world around you, when you pay attention to your own senses and the paranormal and the things that happen to you, there's so much more in the world. Yeah, it's beautiful and it's deep, and most of us completely overlook it because we're just not paying attention to that stuff anymore.
Yeah, we take so much for granted, don't we? Like we're saying that our technology, we take for granted that we're going to be able to do this tomorrow, to be able to have these conversations. But it can happen in a heartbeat. Change. And when we're not ready for it, I mean, everybody hates change. But, maybe going back to that first lesson, being able to adapt, I think maybe is the superpower that we need.
Oh yeah, and change the world we have. It used to be two of the most valuable things, fresh water and salt. These are valuable things in certain parts of the world. I mean, that is essential. And yeah, go into any restaurant, any store, you can get packets of salt. You can ask for a glass of water. You can find a water fountain. There's spigots everywhere that you can drink out of. We have solved a lot of these incredibly crazy problems, but yet, it's tap water. It's not bottled water. It's like, and there's value to that, but we fail to look at I'm going to starve if I don't find water that isn't polluted, or, I've got to build my own well. When the seasons change, it's not there. I need to collect it. And yeah, I just wish more people would because I mean, the gratitude in that is, how bad could it be? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just very grateful. And I think of the world that we have, and I look at people at the supermarket stopping because it's raining and not walking out to their car. And I'm like, what did you do before umbrellas in buildings?
Right. That's the same way here with sun. Like, people don't go out in the sun. I'm like, you're missing.
Oh, I love going out in the sun.
That 90% of people are vitamin D deficient because they're afraid to go out in the sun, because we've been convinced that the sun causes skin cancer. Well, they're finding out now that it's not sun that causes skin cancer. It's the reaction of the sun with the poisons in our system. And the poisons in our system are processed food and sugar.
And what fights cancer? Vitamin D.
Vitamin D, exactly.
So, it's one of those things. You want to have lots of good natural vitamin D. And I think it's really important also, pay attention to what you're looking at. I think about this so heavily, and, you absorb a lot of this light in your vitamin D production through your retinas. And I think, there's different wavelengths that you're only going to see at sunrise and sunset. And there was a podcast that, bringing beta back, bringing something back. It was a Radiolab podcast on Alzheimer's and them trying to solve it. And they bringing gamma back, I think it was. But it was essentially, they found a frequency in the brain that when you have Alzheimer's, your brain goes into this frequency state. So they said, well, instead of trying to fix the brain in other ways, what if we try to bring the brain out of that frequency to its normal frequency? And so they started off with a bunch of experiments that required drilling into the brains of the mice. But once they got this pulsation to go and they were able to recreate this frequency, the effects temporarily changed. And then they were able to do it in a lab with light. And the light was able to turn on natural things that start going and cleaning up plaques. So it wouldn't completely reverse, but it would go through and make them drastically better. And then I start thinking, okay, well, that's pretty amazing. But what about the frequency of our electricity? The lights that we're looking at, the flickering of your LEDs, all the screens, the frequency of those lights, like what effect? Because we are ingesting that as well. It is a nutrient, whether we like it or not. And I don't know. That's one of my, it sounds crazy, like, all the frequencies, radio waves, microwaves, radar array waves, it doesn't matter. But then light, and it's right here and we're making it. So don't know about that, but it's important.
That's no, I love that. It is very important, because one of the things that I'm finding through a lot of these mystic books is that all is sound, everything is frequency. This guy, Dr. Randolph Stone, who wrote the Mystic Bible, he calls it the Holy Shabd, that everything is, creation started with the word, with the logos in the Bible. And that makes 100% sense, because that's how sound healing works. Like you and I were, Bill, you and I were talking about Chance doing the sound healing. I mean, that's the thing. That's exactly what it is essentially setting our body's frequency back to a more natural state, or maybe counteracting that. Like I used to work in military contracting. We did some sound stuff, and honestly, what noise canceling headphones does is a very simple way to talk about how frequency can affect the world around you. Like noise canceling headphones, essentially it takes the outside frequency and does the opposite, and so it cancels out that noise, right? So there are these developments that they've been able to do that on a cubicle. Like there's little boxes that you can get where it'll be silence inside a cubicle now, but you could have machinery going outside it, but the little boxes are sending the opposite frequency inside, so nobody hears that from outside of those four corners of that little thing, right? Well, in your body, it does the same thing. I feel like that grounding, not only is there, when we put our hands and feet in the dirt, there are enzymes that our body absorbs that fight depression, but it's also getting that natural frequency to the earth. When you put metronomes all together, you start them at different times, they will all sync up in pretty quick order. And I feel like that's what we're doing when we are the natural frequencies. We are seeking those natural frequencies. We are coming back to our natural order of our own selves. I think that's what is healing us. That's what I feel like it heals me. I mean, it was a lot of things. It was all the things, really. It was meditation. It was diet. It was getting out. It was exercise. It was all those things. But I do believe that, one of the things that has been coming up a lot too in shamanic cultures is throat singing, also to get you into that state of connecting with spirit. The shamanic cultures of the Polynesian islands too, they used these pictograms of the expressions of God, and each expression of God would be this different picture, right? Which these are what the original Hawaiian shirts were supposed to be. They're pictures of, some of them look like flowers, but some of them start to look like that, like an amoeba of some sort, right? So I'm starting to see these patterns. And I'm like, that almost looks like cymatics to me. And then later on in this, they talk about how everything is sound, that all of creation is sound. And I'm thinking, maybe this whole mandala thing, we've got this backwards, that we think that the sound creates the cymatic. If we can create the cymatic to create the sound, maybe we could heal pretty much anything.
Well, it's the old, it was the voice of God that brought in creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think of just cats. Cats, when they're hurt,
Purring.
they purr. When they're happy, they purr. And then when we take that frequency of sound and we apply it to humans, we now have a new therapy for helping bones heal, where we use subharmonics for healing. And I mean, again, everything comes back down to frequency. And there's so many examples of this world in the world around us. And yeah, I mean, that right there. If a cat can heal its own bones, then maybe there is way more to singing and emotion and music and so many things. And, maybe that negative, that grating, the things that change the way you think, can hurt you in the same way. I don't know. I think of everything I ingest visually, emotionally, sound wise. It's like food. It's going in.
Mhm.
My big change on that was The Walking Dead. After getting hooked on the first season and loving it and realizing that there was nothing good, and I was just getting anxious, and I was becoming that character in the world for my feelings. And yeah, right then and there, I was like, yeah, I can't watch things. I still haven't seen the Joker movie. I really want to see it, but every time I go to watch it, I'm like, not today. Like, I'm ingesting good stuff.
Yeah, I feel you on that, man. I'm a huge Marvel fan. When I was a kid, that was my escape. And I do Marvelous Demystifiers with Chance once a month because of it. I mean, I have this Silver Age knowledge of junk comics, what people would have said were junk comics, but are really personally, I feel like is a secret mythology that I don't think people have really explored the source material, because these movies are not it. And I have such a hard time watching any of the superhero movies, because they're missing the point. The point is not just to tell the same origin story over again. It's the why. Why did he become, it's not just motivation because Batman watched his parents get killed. Revenge is not only goes so far, in a hero journey. There's a growth, and that there's a connection that none of these stories are telling anymore, of how that person learned to develop themselves, to pick themselves up, to become their own superhero. Not because, they make it easy, like radioactive spider gets bit by a radioactive spider, but that's not what made the hero. That's just what gave him power. The hero was all the saving people, but being seen as the enemy, and he's doing a completely thankless job, but he does it anyway because he knows that people are going to get hurt. It's like the X-Men story that they completely miss, is that these are poor weirdo freak kids trying to be normal in a completely abnormal situation, which I was like, oh, that's my people, man. I'm the weirdos. Those are my people. But they keep helping humanity anyway, even though humanity is trying to destroy them and sees them as the threat. And I've taken on, like, if anybody wants to call me mutie, fine, I'm down with that. If that's a slur to anybody else, I'll be a mutant. I'll own that, because those are the people that really struggled. The people that struggled and pulled themselves out of it, those are the people I trust. So thank you, Adam, for bringing that up, because I had the same experience with Walking Dead, and I'm having it with every single Marvel movie now.
At least it's a movie, right? They
Right.
only one every couple of years, so it's not like, wait, every week.
Right. Yeah, and we can choose to give our attentions to what is good.
Well, and honestly, it's like everything else. It's like a bad parent teaches you the things not to do, the paths not to take, and examining things. It gives you, just, I don't know. It's a good perspective. At least they're funny.
Right. Hopefully.
What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it?
Oh yeah, losing my mental facilities is my greatest fear. I have come from a family that has not a lot of neurological issues, but there's Parkinson's, in my family, and I've been around family members with dementia, and that used to be my greatest fear, and getting healthy, and like we're talking about, making that conscious decision that, oh, this affects that, and I don't have to choose that. I can go a different route, where I don't. I can think for myself. I'm not trying to fight my way out of this mental fog that's just trapping me inside of this lack of thought process, where you're just like staring at a screen, watching TV with commercials and just zoning out unremarkably, not seeing the little things all the symbolism that they're throwing in all the Marvel movies now, and reading deeper into them, into any kind of media. I see things a little differently, and being able to approach life with a critical eye, in that you're able to observe and make educated judgments on those, instead of just being a sieve where you're just ingesting, where we're just taking in processed food or the garbage media or the whatever Netflix wants to show you of 50 Dahmer documentaries. Why? Like, nobody's asking the question why everybody wants to talk about Dahmer all of a sudden. Like, that should be a question too.
Yeah, that is kind of odd. I got rid of my Netflix subscription a while ago, but I do remember they had at least one or two documentaries about Dahmer. They're continuing on that cannibalism train. It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, and questioning our reality. It keeps our mental facilities healthy. Like we're talking about, reading a different book or taking a different path, not going down the same roads everybody else's tread, because it's clearly not doing them any good. We have to take that, and that's another thing that I've purposely done is, I walk the desert, hopefully daily. Most days I'll take a walk, and I like to do it at night, because that's when all the wildlife is out in the desert, especially my owls, even though I see them every day during the day. But they get vocal and animated, and you can experience the hunt and everything with them. But those are things I would have never, ever have learned had I not taken a different path. Have I not walked down a different road to see a different thing and find a colony of butterflies down in this wash? Last year, I stumbled on this miraculous event where thousands and thousands of butterflies just hoarded were swarming on this one area of this wash that I hadn't been down before. But it was like witnessing a miracle. All these yellow butterflies everywhere, and I would have never, and nobody else even knew it. And it was one of those things that this isn't a synchronicity. This is magic. This is something that I need to pay attention to. And maybe this is just for me, to show me that nature is telling me something, and maybe it's not to share with everybody else. But we wouldn't know had we not changed our way a little bit. gone down a different road and found those different things. So yeah, it keeps your mental facilities strong.
What is your single greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
Mm. Hopefully, all of our driving force is love for anyone, whether it's the love for our family, our daughter, our wife, our love of nature, love of existence, experience. I found different loves throughout life. Like my love of nature now is pretty strong. That keeps me going a lot. But my love for my wife and daughter kept me alive. It was life-saving. So yeah,
That's
that's
beautiful.
pretty
Like
simple.
your family, that love, that connection keeps you alive, but nature allows life. Like it is the supporting structure. It is something we take for granted so much. I've recently I mean, we're stuck in sterilized environments, not getting sunlight, in a completely new environment. And I recently got some green LED bulbs. They're at like a 520 nanometer frequency. They've done migraine studies, and I get migraines. And so they found that this particular wavelength of light helps soothe people while they have migraine, and seems, to be, better at not aggravating or preventing. And I'm like, well, it's green. Like, does that mean that the natural color of the lights and the photons, and in being in our natural environment, has a neurologic protective quality to it? And I mean, it's wonderful to think about how powerful nature can be. I know in Japan, they do a lot of recommendation for people to walk in the forest for curing different health disorders, improving autoimmune disorders. And it just happens to be that there's terpenes in the air that just happen to be at like 3 to 8 foot tall in the area that we walk, that we don't know how they work. But when you're in that environment and you breathe them in, you're part of this ecosystem, your immunity improves. I mean, there is a true connection in healing. And I mean, when you even think about like, what is forestry? What is planting? If you look at how forests were tended and used, and you would be there as a caretaker, you would work together to make the land more prosperous. And, you look at mycelium underneath the ground doing the same thing and choosing which plants get this and that. Like, we are all part of building this thing that we all survive together on. And yeah, there's a deep love that goes along with that you have to, like, whether you have it or not, it's there.
It makes sense that it's green too, because that's the color of photosynthesis. That's what happens in every plant. That's why nature's green. That's what it turns the sunlight into.
Yeah.
So,
and perception is reality, right? What are you looking at?
Right.
It's your perceiving. And, that gets crazy. I've seen a study where they did hypnotism. They took people that were highly hypnotizable, and they put them under a machine where they could measure the blood flow to the cones in your eyes. So they could tell if you were seeing monocolor or if you were seeing, like, I think it was blue, just based on the blood flow. And this is something that you shouldn't be able to affect. The photons hit, your body reacts, you get more blood flow. But they found that when they hypnotized people to only see something in monochromatic or vice versa, that the blood flow was what they were perceiving. It was changed to not what was actually there, but what they were thinking, and therefore what they were seeing. So there's so many levels, to the harmony of the world. But think it's just really important that people realize, like, you are frequency and you are part of this.
Yeah.
And, there's studies out there we can't explain. There's random number generators that go statistically outside the normal during great events. You can put them inside of, individual ones inside of a hall where there is a large group of people watching a presenter, and it will, tick outside the statistical probabilities at emotional points. And these are things that are measurable. So it's like we have this incredible matrix and connection between us. And yeah, no, I love your answers. They really dive into that, this world is so much more. And if you just open your eyes, like, you can just be filled with that. Like, it's the gratitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just have the gratitude for the things that are around you. And that's important. Like, intention is everything.
And it changes you. It doesn't just change the it.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't just change the thing, because that is happening. We are having a boom of wildlife here. We're getting jaguars back in the mountains right behind me. We're getting fireflies in the desert, which I've never seen before.
Change.
But it changes you when you put that intention out there and you see the reaction. That's a tangible, cause and effect that you can't ignore, and we shouldn't ignore.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let's go ahead.
Who are your role models and why?
Well, when I was a kid, it was the X-Men. Of course, I wanted to be the superpowered, because as a kid, especially like if you're one of the weird kids, or because I wasn't, my stepdad was a professional athlete. I was not a jock. My dad was an academic. I couldn't care less about school. My grandfather was a war hero and a cowboy, which I could get down with cowboy, but military was never going to be my thing. I ended up being military adjacent, but I was a weird kid, but I was the only boy. So there was a lot of pressure. I had all sisters. So I wanted to be, I couldn't be what I was told I should have been because it just wasn't in me, So I wanted to be Nightcrawler. I wanted to be, transporting myself around, or Wolverine, or those kind of things. But as you get older, you find out who the people who are real heroes, or role models. Like Victor Wooten is definitely a role model. Not only is he an amazing musician, he is a fantastic teacher with the most patience I've ever seen in somebody at his level. And a countenance that is just, when you're just in the presence of somebody that's just at peace with themselves, and it's like, wow, am I sitting with a Buddha? Kind of idea. It's like, oh, yeah, that's that dude. That's who I want to emulate. Somebody who's cool with themselves, who are comfortable in their own skin. Those are my role models now. But also the X-Men. I mean, because we can have our own superpowers if you want to. You want to go make friends with owls? Have familiars? Knock yourself out. You know why? Because magic is real. And it's out there. And it's not in some little online group with lots of skulls and wearing goth clothes. I mean, that's cool and everything. I like The Damned, and I was super fan of Susie and the Banshees, but that's not magic. Magic is actually doing the thing and going out being one with nature and interacting, you can have this magical interaction with nature and other things.
Oh, yeah. Pay attention to the world around you, even on just a physical, intrinsic level. I mean, animals, the emotions that you have are so similar. If you want to understand human emotions, look at a dog. You ask them a question, you say their name, they, tilt their head to the side, one ear goes up, these same reactions, these same emotions. You see embarrassment in animals, and, realize that with that, we view the world differently, but there's core communication. We can communicate. You can communicate with birds and reptiles and different things, and gain things and help each other and, plants in the world around you. And you need to be perceptive, because that can tell you so much. If you go out in nature and you go out and you hunt, the animals communicate. The birds of different species. I know this, there's birds that don't get along, whether it's blue jays and mockingbirds and different birds. But when the hawks come into the area, I know the sounds they make. They're talking to each other. I can tell when the hawk is nearby. I mean, and that's just a small circle within a circle of my own perception. And, if we were fully immersed in nature, there would be so much more knowledge about what's going on around the world, and so many things you would be probably open and perceptive to. As soon as you go, outside of society, into nature, you feel. I can't say the complete stillness. We don't have that. We're being bombarded from space by, like satellite radar and things. But the pressure is less. You feel more. So, test it. Go out there, talk to birds, whistle to birds. Pay attention to the fact that you'll hear birds whistling like car alarms. Why? Because we taught them a language. And you can have that same communication. They're not just a bird, and they are real.
Absolutely. Yeah. The owls, and that's another thing that Victor Wooten says in the music lesson, is that language isn't always language. There's language in silence. Like there's, it's music because there's spaces between the notes. Charles Mingus said that that's where God is. Like you don't listen. You can make a page of a whole bunch of notes, but it ain't music. That's the spaces and the breath. And like that's where he was seeing that God would happen. And he had this quote about that people would ask him where his music came from, because it's improvisational or whatever. He said it came from the ether, that it came from source and spirit, because he was just a vessel for the music. And there is a language in the silence. That's definitely something I've learned from the owls, is that when you watch them, they're speaking all the time. Even when they're sleeping, they do this thing where half their brain will shut down. So one thing, you see how owls have independent eyes, right? They will shut down one half of their brain and rest it while the other half stays alert. And so they can be in a tree and be alert while they're actually sleeping at the same time. So so I will meditate under that tree as many days of the week as I can. But if I see them react to something, that's when I pay attention, because they have superhuman hearing and sight. So I'm going to trust their senses way more than I trust mine. And if they say there's something happening, they'll know it first. And their interaction with each other also, I would never know. Like nobody would ever know that a baby owl mourns its or has an emotional reaction when its other siblings leave the nest. When they fledge, there's an emotional reaction in them. I've documented that on my Instagram, that when the babies leave the nest, they do it in stages because each one is at a different age. Each egg is laid on a different day, and they do this on purpose so that, and they could be a week between each egg that in one clutch. So they do it on purpose so that they don't outgrow the nest at one time. Like the one will be growing up and ready to fledge while the other one is still coming up, right? So I had a game camera on their nest this year, and each time one of the babies would fledge and finally leave the nest, the other ones would have an emotional reaction. They puff up and they clack, which is what owls do in threat. There's clearly not a threat, but it's this emotional reaction, like, oh my God, kind of thing. And they flush up with their feathers, and they do this thing where you can see it when they first react. There's a flutter of feathers on their heads, like that kind of does a ripple thing. And that's something I've never read in a book. Even the Audubon Society, I've read all of the owl stuff. Nobody knows that's a thing, but I know it's a thing because I've watched 3 generations of baby owlets do it. And that's a language that nobody would have heard, that I don't know if anybody even knows. I don't know if owl experts even know. But it's definitely a thing, at least with my babies it was. So yeah, if we're just quiet and listen, we can learn whole languages.
Oh yeah, and
that aren't speaking.
Be open to anything. Jackson Galaxy, I've got recently hooked on him. He did Cat from Hell on Animal Planet, but he's a cat behavioralist and trainer, helps you with problems. But deep dives into things like cat language. And one thing that, and I pride myself on the fact that I can train cats. I've always been very good with cats. I joke that, I can get my cats to come when I call them. Like, it's like, I'm very proud of just that communication and that bond that I share, but I completely miss the language of blinking eyes. That when a cat is looking at you and they slowly close their eyes and they slowly open them up, that this is me telling you that I am completely okay with closing my eyes and opening them. I'm telling you this. And when you do that back to a cat, they will react. This elicits that emotion, that understanding in them. And it's on a different level than we think. And, cats will walk into the room and they'll kind of give you a quick nod. They'll nod their head at you. They're kind of saying, hey, what's up? Like, you can do these things back, and then start realizing that you might be using words and they're not listening to the complicated thoughts, but now you're just closing your eyes at a certain speed. And now we're having a direct communication. Now we're saying we're okay to be with each other. We're both comfortable. Like, yeah. And that's in every single aspect. And you just got to pay attention. Just because it's not written in a book doesn't mean you can't be the expert or still utilize those tools. I mean, we are all experts of nature. I mean, at one point in time, as smart as you think somebody is in whatever massive technological field, the Elon Musk, the anything that you think of, the teams that made the magic of the cell phone that's in your hand, for the millions or thousands, pick your belief of years that we were living in the environment, that knowledge was tooled to the world around you, to nature around you. And, when you think about Akashic record or morphic resonance, these things that we can prove scientifically, that there is this memory that goes on. You can have rats do certain mazes and runs and take them in other parts of the world and have them do them. And they will start at the same speed level, not going back. You can do it with growing crystals that have never been synthesized before. They start growing slower, and then in time up to a point, they'll grow faster. And then no matter where or when you synthesize them, they grow faster. So just to think that knowledge is there. And in my mind, if it has been perceived, done by somebody else in the way that, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Wright brothers, and I forget their name, but it's debated who started flight. Two people completely separated, coming up with the same idea that within weeks of each other accomplished this brand new thing for society. Well, I don't know. If somebody out there has had this amazing discovery, then you can access and discover it just by using your eyes. There will be a connection. There will be something that speaks to you, that source, that thing that gives you the music. And it doesn't have to be very much, but understanding the emotion of that grief or that feeling that you can see with that bird. I mean, I don't know. I think it's important to observe those things. Once you start putting yourself into that world, your worldview will change.
Yeah. And that's with anything. I think whatever your creative endeavor is, I think.
What quality do you most admire in a woman?
I wrote down something. I was like, because I'm marveling at my wife right now. She has some back issues and she's going through some health issues, and just the way a woman can handle pain and just keep going is absolutely amazing. But having, being an emotional creature too, that we as men are told that we're not either not allowed to, or being bred that we shouldn't because it makes us weak. But being in touch with your emotions is only something that I've really come to acknowledge as a strength in the last few years. Being in your body and like taking inventory of how do I feel about this thing, and being in the emotion and not pushing away from it, like sit in whatever grief it is, or whatever the emotion is, sit in it, experience it. Because even if it's painful, because if you don't understand the pain, you're not going to understand the joys also. I remember after getting off of all of my medications and the alcohol, and I lost, I think it was the first 50 pounds in only a matter of months after I started eating healthy and really like making my own meals from scratch every time. It was amazing how there was a euphoria because there wasn't the chronic pain anymore. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I didn't know life could be like this, and I wouldn't have known how great that euphoria was had I not been at the worst, maybe. So I admire a woman's ability to be able to sit in those emotions and actually, we deal with those emotions differently in different ways, but I admire that they can talk it out and then it's out and it's gone. Whereas we kind of sit in them. We don't talk about, or we're not given societal permission to talk about these things in polite society, whatever that is anymore. If that is even a thing. We used to call it polite society. We don't anymore for a very good reason, because society is not very polite. But a woman's ability to work through things, I think, is amazing. I admire it every time. It's like, wow, you feel like that? And then I'm like, I wish I could feel like that. Like, oh, wait, I could feel like that if I wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, we all can. I think that's what a good woman will teach a man in a relationship is how to deal with emotions, how to in a healthy way, right? And that would you can call that like the feminine energy, right? The divine feminine. It would be like emotional, and then I guess maybe you could make the argument that the other side of that, the complementary side, would be the logical, right? And then you could even split that on the chakra system, like lower and upper chakras. Lower is emotional, higher is more. Higher ones are more intellectual, right? But it's the synthesis of the two at the heart, which is the center chakra, coincidentally, which is important, which is where everything comes together. And I think that the emotional part is really what I agree with you. It's something that I admired women too, and the pain thing too. Like I'm glad I'm not in pain once a month, right?
Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful perspective because, men especially, at least I can speak for myself, you try to make things better. You try to avoid the really hard things, try to always, look at the light side. But, if you eat ice cream every day, it's just ice cream, but if you don't eat it often, and then there's that one hot summer day, like it is amazing. And there is a balance. You can't have light without dark, you need the nighttime. You need that necrosis. You need the sun to come out and sterilize, the things, the living in the light that grow. At night, the death breaks down, becomes something new. And yeah, it's beautiful that part of our species is just geared better to see that balance. And yeah, it's like you said, I think you really truly can see the higher highs, as long as you're cognizant, aware of the lows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you don't want to live at either, but you need to understand
Balance.
both.
You don't appreciate
balance.
life until you experience a very painful death.
That's right.
You don't appreciate what you love and what you have until it's no longer there. And it's these weird lessons that you have to experience and go forward. And yeah, something I think we could all do. It's a very admirable quality.
Yeah, that's right.
What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
I think the most courageous thing that I've done is go through that rehab process and stick to it. And everybody that I went through that process with, not all of them have done it, but I have a deep appreciation for those that I went through that process with and are still clean, because they had it a lot of ways they had it worse than I did. And I've seen, and I know what it takes to do that, the work, the internal work that it does. That's the courageous part. It's not just doing it. It's not the act. And it's not the actually being clean that is the courageous part. It's the deep shadow work that you had to do to make it stick. That's the courageous part. And to be able to come back and tell that story in an honest way, I think takes a lot of courage. And I've seen quite a handful of people do that. And I'm always like, every single time I'm like, man, that is the most badass. Like, you can hear these war stories of these, amazing warriors, and it is amazing sometimes. But somebody that went through mental illness and came back from it, that's a badass. Like, because that had to take a lot of really hard examinations of yourself. And I think that's the scariest battlefield, really, and that's why so few people do it, is, the self-examination. This is why people don't live their authentic selves. Because they're afraid to look at those bad sides of themselves, or just admit that those things exist within all of us. But once we do deal with it and get through it, that takes a level of badassery that's a little above just walking through bullets,
Yeah, it's mental badassness, right? The mental game is strong, to continue to live in such a way, to after you've made such drastic changes. It's not, because like you were saying, it wasn't even, I don't know, I'm thinking of my own experiences with alcohol. I didn't go to rehab or anything, but I certainly had, the thing that touched me was the reintegrating part it back into like your normal situation after you get on the other side, so to speak, right? Because you can't do the same things that you used to do. All of your habits change,
Right.
basically,
Right.
So yeah, it is definitely a different level of mental metal, I guess.
Yeah, and when you do come out of the other side, it's you have another perspective that you didn't have before, and giving that past self compassion rather than judgment, because a lot of the AA 12-step kind of things, there's still a lot of judgment in those groups. They try not to be, but I see guys doing it because they're judging themselves, their former selves, and then you can see it keeps them in this cycle. And thank God for those groups, because that keeps them from going back. But that's another thing that you're dependent on. If you didn't do that work within yourself, you'll keep repeating those patterns and still need that thing that is another addiction. People become addicted to the process itself, to the 12 steps and to the meetings and all that. But that's a courageous thing, is also giving yourself that permission and compassion.
If you could give one sentence of advice to the future generations, what would it be?
I have to make it in one sentence.
It can be longer than a tweet. The standard. What is that?
Because I think if I had to make it one sentence, it'd be that nature wants to conspire with us. And I say that conspire as a conspiracy in its original meaning, like that we breathe together. That when we breathe with nature, it wants to naturally heal us. And then we learn all these different things. My study group is called the Conspiratorium, and I specifically lean into the word conspiracy because in its original root, it is breathing together. It is, there's this ancient tradition of putting one's heads together and breathing the same air. That is a conspiracy. We conspire together. We breathe in the same air. We do it at the same time. And I think having these these kinds of conversations that aren't happening out in our regular world, that we can have in these, is conspiring other thought. It's building other things, and it's adding to the magic. So yeah, I would say that nature wants to conspire with us, and we need to allow it. And in order to allow it, we have to give it those opportunities. And to give it those opportunities, we have to spend time with it. We have to invest the time to spend out in the sunlight to get the vitamin D to heal ourselves, to stick our hands consciously in the dirt, and to consciously listen to the animals that want to teach us all sorts of things that we didn't even know we needed to learn. But nature did.
It reminds me of a meme that I shared recently. It's just a picture of Terrence McKenna, and it says, "Nature is alive and talking to us." This is not a metaphor.
Yeah, 100%. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. People constantly think that the world is conspiring against them, but flip it around and think that the world is conspiring for you. Maybe you're in a game and, there's a secret hidden key or a bonus pack or, a little hidden level,
Right,
or something else, little mana you can find, but if you think about the world conspiring for you, maybe you'll get that positive angle instead of getting the negative thing that you're asking. When you're cursing and saying, "God damn it," which I'm so guilty of. Well, is my world damned? Have I gotten what I've asked for? I've put the vocalization out. That frequency is there. I have asked for something, and mantras work. So yeah,
right.
it's a beautiful thing. And I implore people also to do that. If you really want to prove magic to yourself, mantras work. Believe it or not, they work. Try it,
Yeah.
stick with it, watch something manifest, and it doesn't matter what science says. It's what you says that matters.
The science is your experience.
Perception is reality.
Right, and that's gnosis, right? My friend Cheney calls it the secret society, or was it Secret Society of Good Guys, the SOGs? That there's a secret society of good guys out there conspiring for us, that's been keeping all that evil at bay all these years, and are probably working hardest right now. That we think that the world is falling apart, but there's probably the equal and opposite is always true. If we recognize that those things are real, then the opposite has to be real as well. So yeah, there are conspiracies of good, and we're part of it. I would rather be part of that, the conspiracy to talk to you guys about the beautiful things in the world and the lessons that we've learned, than add to the myriad of bullshit that's on social media again.
Well, and sometimes there needs to be a fire. The forest has to get burned to grow back stronger and thrive. And it really is hard to see the forest through the trees.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a great analogy about like a butterfly. If you were just to take the butterfly, not at the caterpillar, not at the butterfly stage, but you go into the middle of the cocoon and you open it up, it's just a bunch of goo. There's no cohesion. There's nothing that makes sense. You can't see it, but eventually that disorganization is going to turn into something brand new and beautiful, but you can't see it. And so, I like to think that as bad as we think things are, it could be, it's that birthing pain, that growing pain. It needs to be there, and we can't see it. But when we're on the opposite side and we're looking back, like, we'll find the gems. They'll be there.
Yeah. It's true. It's beautiful.
Well, that was our final question. That was technically question 14.
So are you guys going to have to change the name of the podcast?
No,
to
I don't
14
know.
questions?
We're actually going back to our roots. The podcast started off with 14 questions, and I thought Darren made a mistake and the list he gave me, and I removed a question and started doing 13, only to find out that Darren did it on purpose.
Ah,
So yeah, I guess
how
I don't know.
nice.
We're shifting back to our roots.
That's cool. Very cool. I love that. I love this conversation. This was great. Appreciate you guys doing this.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to spend with us. That is something that we'll never get back, and I think it was well spent. And then I really enjoyed talking to you. And I'm gonna check out the weaving web, the spiders, and definitely the study group. I don't know that I'll be able to stay out super late with that, but definitely I'm really into weird books, and it sounds like you got a bunch of them. So
Yeah, and I share the PDFs in the Telegram group.
okay.
So if it anything else, just join the Telegram group just to get PDFs of weird books.
Right on.
So
Awesome. I will do that. Thank you again.
and Adam, good luck. How's your migraines now? Is the green light getting better?
Well, I've only had them here for like a week or two. So I am going to be working from home here in the near future. So I'll be definitely exposed to a lot more of it. So I will have updates.
Well, good. I'll be anxious to hear that. As a chronic migraine sufferer in the past, I can appreciate what that does to a person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing how that turns out.
Yeah.
Good deal.
I'll let you know. Keep listening. I'll have an update.
Right on. Thank
All
you,
right.
gentlemen.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for giving us your time. It's it's your life. You gave us a portion of your life today, and thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. No problem.
I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo,
Why
what?
is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rent so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why? I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo,
Why is
what?
there innocent people locked up for life? While some people can't say nothing nice. Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from
you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii? How you wanna Hawaii, yo what?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.
May the road rise up to meet your wheels.